Well, good morning, River Church family. I am just 10 o'clock. I'm so excited to be with you guys. I don't get to be in this service that often, and let me tell you, when I worship with you all, it's a treat. So I'm so excited to be here with you guys today. I'm not Pastor Matthew. I am Pastor Sam. I am our middle school and high school pastor here. I'm super excited to share the word with you guys today. But before I dive into that word, I just want to honor our college students in the room. Because I know for many of you families, you are in the thick of spring sports, spring prom, spring musical, spring everything schedules. I know. But for our college students, their summer break actually starts on Thursday. And so to our IWU students that are here, I just want to say on behalf of our River Church family, we're so honored that we get to be a part of your spiritual development and part of making Grant County home. I know I've been in your shoes before. I know what it's like to walk into a church when you've grown up in a church, and now you're going to a new place the first time with new people that you've never met. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for trying us out. Thank you for staying. And if it's your last Sunday with us before you're graduating, we are so excited for what God has for you. We're so excited to send you with a little River Church DNA all around the world. And so we are so excited for you, and good luck on finals. But today, Pastor Matthew last week shared about one of Pastor Amy's biggest fears is heights. Now, I'm not saying I'm pro heights, per se, but I have one fear that trumps heights for me, and that is frozen water. Now, this fear started for me when my parents forced my siblings and I to watch It's a Wonderful Life as a kid. Now, if your family was anything like mine, I don't think we ever actually made it through It's a Wonderful Life. I think we got 25 minutes in and the magic stopped because we were all tired. But I vividly remember in the first couple scenes, there's a scene where George Bailey's brother is on a shovel and just goes down the hill onto the frozen pond and then falls under the ice. And that just scarred me as a kid. I don't know why. But ever since then, I have been convinced that if I even get close to anything larger than an ice cube, that same fate is happening to me. That same fear led me into college, where I was on a retreat with a couple people I was on staff with, and we were at this house that had a pond, and for some reason, because college guys are let's go wrestle on the middle of this frozen pond. And so they just are running there, and that is not something I want to deal with. And so I'm standing to the edge of the pond. And then one of my friends in the group, his name was Nathan, he looked over at me and my face went white. I thought he was going to fireman's carry me out there and force me to face my fears. But he didn't do that. Instead, he grabbed me by the hand and just stood right at the edge of the frozen pond with me. I was facing my fears, I was on it, but he was with me the entire time. We're going to be talking about community today as we're continuing this series about purpose, and those are the kinds of friends I want to talk about today. Also, another one of the fears of mine, I guess I'm just unloading all this on you guys, you're welcome. But one of those other fears of mine is tight spaces. When I was in third grade, I went to a city museum in St. Louis, and they have this underground cave thing. And you could supposed to crawl through the parts of the cave, and I was crawling through one of them, and I got stuck. And in third grade, Sam had to have an adult chaperone pull me out of the cave. And ever since then, I don't want anything to do with the spaces that I cannot have full wingspan around, right? And when I think of something that, another time where that happened was these Thai boys that probably a lot of us saw this story on the news. There was these 12 soccer team boys and their assistant coach were trapped in a cave for weeks in Thailand. They were going to explore the cave, and then rainwaters came in just as they were going in. The rainwaters got so high that they got trapped in the cave. For 9 days, it seemed like all was lost. But then a team of Navy SEALs and divers and police officers and farmers and even people that were on a vacation trip to Thailand were coming and helping the cause. And they finally, after 9 days, found these boys. But because of how tight the spaces were, sometimes the spaces they had to go through were only 15 inches wide. They had to be creative. And so I want you guys to watch this video here.
The full details of how the 12 Thai boys and their coach were rescued are finally emerging. The boys were first given anti-anxiety medication that prevented panic attacks while ensuring they remained conscious and breathing. They were then equipped with full face masks and secured to flexible plastic stretchers. In fully flooded areas, the teams held onto guide ropes while they moved the stretchers forward, surfacing roughly every 40 minutes to check the boys' vitals. To navigate downhill slopes, the stretchers were slid over thick hoses that were being used to pump water out of the cave. Teams then carried the stretchers while navigating other areas of the cave. And while crossing wet and uneven areas, stretchers were supported by overhead ropes to keep the boys stable. Finally, in flooded areas, stretchers were placed on rafts which were pushed by rescue team members across the water. After several return trips and one diver losing his life, the 12 boys and their coach were finally rescued from the cave.
What I find so cool about this rescue is just how much those boys were prioritized the whole time. Like the image of when they're on the ropes, there's one diver in front, one on the other, having the boy in the center. Or when they're on the rocks, they're letting the boy float while the divers have to step on all these sharp rocks. And one that's especially poignant to me is that image at the very end of this murky water. It said that this water was so murky that even the brightest headlamps couldn't see more than 2 inches in front of them. They went through all of that while raising the boy out of the water, laying down, and he didn't have to experience any of it. That is the kind of friends that we need. We need people raising us out of the water. When life feels murky and you feel trapped and you don't know what to do, you need friends that are willing to dive in and raise you above the water. So the question to you guys today is, who is raising you above the water? Who is raising you above the water? You see, we're in a series this month called My Why that is all about you discovering your purpose. Last week, Pastor Matthew was, there was a balance beam right here. I'm not sure if y'all remember that. And like, y'all front row people, I'm not coming to you today. You can rest good today. But Pastor Matthew talked about when God gives us a purpose that we actually have to go out and do it. And he used this image of a tightrope walker walking between the two twin towers. Now, like I said, not pro heights, but I think I could maybe get enough courage to get like one step on. But I think the real fear would sink into me, not the first step, but like, oh my, I have to do 50 more steps after this. And each step that I go, I am farther away from the thing that's secure, right? And so when we're living out our purpose, maybe you guys over this series, God has given you a direction for your life. God has given you someone you're supposed to share Jesus with, right? And you get super amped and you have that faith and you do the big thing of saying yes to God. But what you've probably also realized is that's a lot harder than we think that's going to be. The follow through is where the faith is required. Because maybe you went to share Jesus with someone and you got your story ready, you were prayed up, you were prepped to go, and you offered them a chance to know Jesus and they said no. Or maybe that we're sharing with people this really exciting news that God had given you this purpose of what he wants you to do with your life, and people weren't negative, but they started saying, you sure you want to go all in on that? You sure you don't want to have a backup plan? Hey, maybe you should try this instead. Or maybe you're trying to live out that purpose, right? But there's something with a family member. There's a job, something going on at work. There's a financial crisis that is just taking all of your time, and you don't have any mental space to focus on this thing that God's calling you to do. Or maybe you're one of the people here that has recently gotten baptized or come to know Jesus. We're so excited for you. And you probably heard people say this is going to be the best life that you have possible. Jesus promises life to the full when you come to know him. And ever since then, your life has really not felt like life to the full. It seemed like life has gotten harder, not easier. But that's because when we're living out for Jesus, living out our purpose, no wonder the enemy wants to seek and kill and destroy what God is planting in us. But that, my friends, is a time when most we need friends to raise us above that water, the waters of life. But that's hard to do in our culture because we live in a culture of constantly casual relationships. Right, when you scroll through social media, you're watching a TV show, you're hearing a friend describe their friend, you hear them talking about sitting next to each other at ball games. You see them talking about going on vacations together, coming over to each other's houses for dinner parties, right? And you just want that. But you don't ever really hear people say like, oh, yeah, we share our tough stuff together. Right? Because we yearn for these casual relationships and we've settled for these casual relationships, but God has called us to more. Every single one of us in this room can name it people that we do life with, whether they're your friends or not. Everyone has people that you do life with. But my question is, who knows you? Not just like knows you exist, but who really knows you? Who's asking you the questions you don't want to hear? Who's sharing with you wisdom when you need it? Who are the friends that are rising you above the water, not distancing away when life is hard? The psalmist David says this in Psalm 133. He says, "Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brothers to live together in unity. It is like precious oil on the head, running down upon the beard as on Aaron's beard, the oil which ran down upon the edge of his robes. It's like the dew of Hermon coming down upon the mountains of Zion, for the Lord commanded the blessing there, life forever." God commands blessing when we're in the context of relationship with people. Life to the full that we talk about. And so my question to you is, are you experiencing that blessing right now? Are you experiencing life to the full? But instead, when this is offered, a lot of us like to choose isolation. We've settled for casual relationships. We've settled for relationships where you scroll. We settled for relationships where, oh yeah, last time we talked was like 15 years ago, but like they're my best friend, Sam. Or we've chosen just to not let people into the hard stuff. You see, Elizabeth and I, we host a life group at our house every other week. And Elizabeth and I like to say that our house, and the orderliness and the cleanliness of our house reflects the orderliness and cleanliness of our weeks. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Like when life is a mess, our house looks like a mess. And it seems more often than not that is the week when our life group is coming over. And so Elizabeth and I get home from work and we're shoving things into drawers. We're like pushing things into cabinets, closing doors, right? I can't be the only one that's guilty of this, right? But there are like our life group. They're the people that we're supposed to be inviting into our mess. But instead, we shove everything down. Like, oh, we're fine. Our life is clean this week. It's perfect. More than just our physical space, aren't we so guilty of doing that with our life with Jesus? Right? Just whenever we're in contact with people, we just shove it down, push it away, act like it doesn't exist, and want people to seem like we're fine. But God invites us to call people into our mess. You see, David, who we just talked about, David had one of the biggest failures of the Bible. He didn't learn this lesson. In Proverbs 23:13, it says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." Right? Are the people in your life sharpening you, making you look more like the image that God has called you to be, more of the purpose that God has called you to be? Or are you isolating yourself and becoming just a duller version of yourself? Right? Iron become dull over time. We'll be dull over time if we don't have people sharpening us. And David learned this lesson because he was the David that killed Goliath with just a stone, became the king of Israel, right? But then we read this in 2 Samuel chapter 11. It says, in the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. You see, David here is about to commit one of the biggest failures in all of Scripture. He's about to sleep with a married woman, and he's going to kill her husband to cover it up. But all of that started when he isolated himself. He was supposed to be out with his people, but he stayed back by himself, didn't want to get into the mess. And that is where the enemy came, because isolation will only pull us from righteousness. Isolation will only pull us from righteousness. Are you walking towards your purpose alone? Are you trying to contend for Jesus and live this life out for Jesus alone? Because guys, we don't have enough willpower to do that. We're not good enough to do that. I find these two things to be true about community. The first one is that community will form you no matter what. My parents had a pool in our backyard growing up, and I always got really, really mad when I was in the raft and it would get blown all the way to the other side where everyone was like splashing around and I was just trying to relax, right? Because those things, unless they're anchored to the ground, won't stand still because the wind will push it over and over again. Same is true about us. We are not strong enough not to be influenced by the people in our life. The people in our life, whether we like it or not, are going to form us, are going to push us to be people, going to change us. And our staff and I, we were in a training this week, and the person that was leading the training had this quote that I'm still thinking about. He said, "You are the product of the 5 people you spend the most time around. Not the people you like the most, not the people you wish to be like, not your favorite people, no, the 5 people you spend the most time around." Let's do an inventory of your friend group, your life. Do you want to look like those 5 people? Because community is going to form you no matter what. The second thing I found to be true is that often we spend too much time wishing for a better community that we miss the one that God has given us. If you're anything like me and you're new to this area, I came in here as a college student and fell in love that I never left. But whether you married into here, you're a college student, your work brought you here, right? Or maybe you've grown up here, but you're new to this faith community. I know how isolating and hard it can feel when everyone around you has relationships and you don't. When everyone seems like they have that connection and you don't. And so if you're anything like me, you just pray like, God, will you give me that community? Will you give me those people in my life that look like me, that act like me, that feel effortless, right? The people that you see on social media, like those kind of friendships. And God answers those prayers, I think, often looking at us being like, yeah, they're right in front of you. And we answer, no, God, not these people. They're not like me. I want people that are like me. Oftentimes, we spend too much time wishing for a better community that we miss the one that God has given us. Dietrich Bonhoeffer says this. He says, "Those who love the dream of Christian community more than Christian community itself become a destroyer of that community." If we spend too much time wishing and not enough time engaging, we're going to destroy the blessing that God has commanded for us. Can I tell you there's a better way? Can I tell you there's a better way than just dreaming of community? There's a better way than isolation. There's a better way than just stuffing it down. And that way, God has commanded his blessing there. It's intended for us to sharpen you. And our friend Nehemiah that we've been talking about has something to say about it. So if you haven't been here over the last month, we've been walking through the book of Nehemiah, and today we're going to be in Nehemiah chapter 4. Now, Nehemiah was the cupbearer to the king, which meant he had the really cool job of just being the king's cup holder. Just anytime the king wanted to drink, he was there. And so he was not the person most people would be their first round pick to make this change in Israel that God was calling him to do. God was calling him to build this wall around Israel that had been destroyed. And so last week, Pastor Matthew showed that he had to have a lot of courage and a lot of faith to go and ask the king to go there, and he did, and God blessed his faith. But life wasn't peachy once he said his yes. He had these 2 friends, well, more frenemies, Sanballat and Tobiah, who constantly hurls insults, say, this will never get done. You can't do this. And so how does Nehemiah respond to the insults he gets once he's living out his purpose? We read it here starting in Nehemiah chapter 4. Hear us, O God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder in a land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders. So you built the wall till all of it reached half its height. And the people worked there with all of their heart. When Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the people of Ashdod heard the repairs to Jerusalem's walls had gone ahead and that the gaps were being closed, they were very angry. They plotted together to come up and fight against Jerusalem and stir up trouble against it. But we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat. You see, Nehemiah had been pretty much on his own here. But when things got hard, he knew he needed other people. And so what's the first thing he does? He gathers his people together and he prays. First thing he says, hear us together, O God. We need your help. We need your protection. We are going to flail on our own. That is why true community prays together. Right? Nehemiah's life didn't get easier when he prayed. It actually got harder. A lot of times we're living out our purpose. Our life is going to get harder. That's the enemy's tactic. But he said, all right, we're going to pray again. And they prayed, and they prayed, and they prayed together. Do you have people in your life that are praying for you? Do you have people that when the waters of this life happens, when something bad happens, when you're struggling, do you have someone you can reach out to pray for you and you know they're going to pray? Or maybe the better question is, for that person, have you actually asked them recently? Or you're trying to make it seem like life is just peachy, that you're not struggling? See, prayer is the most loving thing we can do for a person. I can't fix your situation, but you know what? I'm going to lift it up to the one who can, right? So why are we preventing our people from loving us so well? True community prays together. Nehemiah gives us another tip on community. In Judah, it was said their strength of the laborer fails, since there is so much rubble. We'll never be able to rebuild the wall. And our enemies said, they won't realize until we're among them and can kill them and stop their work. When the Jews who lived nearby arrived, they said to us time and time again, everywhere you turn, they attack us. So I stationed people behind the lowest sections of the walls and the vulnerable areas. I stationed them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. You see, Nehemiah and his team, they prayed, but then they realized there was real threats happening. There was a real enemy, both spiritually and physically. And so Nehemiah and his crew knew they needed more. And so Nehemiah positioned all of his friends to spots where he was the weakest. I think this is a beautiful image of what we should do with our community, because true community knows each other's weaknesses. True community knows each other's weaknesses. When are you at your weakest? When are you most likely to sin? When are you most likely to abandon your purpose? Maybe it's at night. Maybe it's when you're scrolling on your phone. Maybe it's when you're with that certain person. Maybe it's around a certain holiday or around a time that reminds you of a lost loved one. Maybe your marriage right now is rocky. Maybe you're struggling with a certain addiction. Maybe you're struggling financially. Maybe you're struggling with doubt. Maybe you have just hopelessness and despair in your life. You know that. God may know that. My question to you is, who else knows that? Who knows that? Because true community knows each other's weaknesses, and they say, hey, Sam, I know you're weak here, so I am going to be on guard and stand in the gap for you. That is how God commanded us to live with friends. You see, I had a really impactful summer between my sophomore and junior year of college. And so coming back to campus, I knew that I was going to need those kind of friends to stand in the gap for me, to confess my weaknesses to and ask them to pray for me and to hold me accountable. And as I was praying for who that might be, God kept calling me to this friend named Andrew. Now, Andrew lived across the hall from me, and I could say we were friends, like we knew each other, but we weren't like in real relationship with each other. So I was like, God, are you sure? And also, his life was a lot different than mine. So we really weren't a match, but God kept calling me to him, so I said, okay, God, okay. And I'd go up to his door, and I'd strike a conversation with him, but then I lose the courage. So it's like, okay, I need more extended time with him because eventually I'll have enough courage, right? And so I saw that Andrew would go on a run every single night. Now, mind you, at this point in my life, I had not run for 4 years, but I'm like, this has got to be it. And so I'm like, Andrew, I would love to run with you next week. And so that's what we did. For about a week, we ran every night around campus many of the times, and I was far behind him. But we ran, and then we made a lot of laps around campus until I had my 5 minutes of courage moment. And I said, hey, Andrew, can I tell you some stuff I'm struggling with right now? And I can tell you guys, the spot of 38th Street, that slab of sidewalk where I started the most intentional and caring friendship I have ever had. But that only happened because I had 5 minutes of courage and showed my friend where I was weak. Have you had that 5 minutes of courage moment with a friend? Or are you just trying to stuff it down like it's fine? Because we are not strong enough to withstand the enemy by our own willpower, right? We need others. True community knows each other's weaknesses. Let's keep reading. After I made an inspection, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the great and awe-inspiring Lord and fight for your countrymen, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. You see, Nehemiah's friends, they were prayed up. They were at his weak spots. They were holding the spear. They're ready to fight. But they're sitting there like this. Like hands shaking, knowing the threat that's coming. And the threat wasn't made up. It was real. And so Nehemiah knew he had to have a locker room huddle with them and said, hey, remember, the Lord is fighting for you. Keep your eyes fixed on God. Right? That's why Matthew last week when he talked about the tightrope walker didn't need friends to be like, that's a long way down there. The people are really tiny, right? The tightrope walker needs friends to say, hey, keep looking. Next step, keep looking up and above. We need friends that we can be vulnerable to confess our weaknesses to, but also, true community strengthens our faith muscles. Right, just like we work out in a gym and we need to work out our mind, we also need to work out our faith, and we need friends that strengthen our faith. We need friends that when we don't have any faith and we're doubting God and we are not sure how we're going to make it out, we need friends that say, hey, you can borrow my faith for a little bit. True community strengthens our faith muscles because life is too hard for our own willpower. We need people not just to show us our situation, but to show us and point us back to Jesus, who is greater than our situation. My life group, we listened to this book called Find Your People last semester, and this quote in here I'm still thinking about that Jenny Allen says, you and I need friends who instead of trying to fix us, help us to fix our eyes more firmly on Jesus. We're not strong enough to fix other people, but we can fix other people's eyes on Jesus. Are your friends fixing your eyes on Jesus? Nehemiah has one more thing to say. Now in verse 15, when our enemies heard that we knew their scheme and that God had frustrated it, every one of us returned to his own work on the wall. From that day on, half my men did the work, while the other half held spears, shields, bows, and armors. The officers supported all the people of Judah who were rebuilding the wall. The laborers who carried their loads worked with one hand and held a weapon with the other. Each one of the builders had his sword strapped around his waist while he was building, and the one who sounded the ram's horn was beside me. You see, we've settled for long-distance friends. I think long-distance friends are great. Some of my closest friends are long-distance friends. But we need friends to rub shoulders with. We need friends that when life is going hard and say like, hey, I'm praying for you. We also need friends that pick up a spear and like, I'm gonna fight this with you, next to you. right? Because true community serves alongside you. We need to rub shoulders with other believers and have them physically in our life, physically in our circumstances, physically in the murk and the waters of this life. You see, when I was with Andrew, I think I picked up my running kick again because I decided for some reason that after college I was going to start running half marathons. And I decided I was going to do it completely on my own because I was in cross country when I was in school. And I was not a very cute runner. Like, I had a reputation on my team for looking like I was like foaming at the mouth while I was running. Like, not the thing I want to invite other people into, right? And so I trained on my own. I formed my playlist on my own. I did my pregame regimen on my own. And I did my first 10 miles on my own. But this most recent half marathon, I was determined that I was going to run a half marathon in under 2 hours. I got really close the last time. And I wanted to see if I could beat it. But there's something about mile 11 that just kills me every time. Because you can like taste the end, your body is feeling the end, but the end's still kind of far off. And I've learned from running half marathons that if I ever walk, like it's done. I'm gonna stop, right? Like I gotta keep myself in a running formation. But I didn't know how I was gonna do it. I was tired, I was done. But at the half marathon, they have these pacers that will hold up a sign that says like an hour 30, an hour 45, 2 hours. And they promise that if you run next to or behind that runner, you will match the time that is on their poster. And so as I was heaving along, the 2-hour pacer came right by me. I saw him out of the corner of my eye, and I just ran up to him. And I was like, dude, I'm about to quit, and I don't know who you are, and you don't know who I am. But we are gonna run this thing together, and I'm gonna talk to you the whole time to get my mind off my pain. We're gonna get to know each other for these next 2 miles. And we did. We talked about my friends, my family. We talked about you guys. The guy's name was Dean. And then at the last corner, the last turn, I had made it all the way to the end, still on pace for 2 hours. And he looks at me, he says, dust me. And then I run straight to a 1:57 half marathon. But I would have walked, I would have stopped, I would have quit if I just did it on my own. Hebrews 12 says we need to run the race towards Christ, but run the race didn't mean run the race alone. Run the race means we need to be at people right next to us that are like, I want to quit, but you're going to help me through this. And then when we have our strength back, they tell us to dust us and run towards Jesus. That is the kind of community God commanded his blessing for. And that's why here at the river, we have made every single option we can have available, from your youngest babies to your oldest high schoolers, to have every opportunity in every service to form these kind of relationships. We have small groups at every single service. We believe that there is ministry in Mario Kart and Papa Shot, right? Because we know that what Pastor Alex and our team does and says won't last, won't be remembered. But we know these relationships that they form last and are the ones that will help them run the race. We also know that shared experiences are so powerful, that when you have a powerful experience and have someone next to you, right? So that's why we have camp and summer blast and motion and all these experiences, because we know how important it is to rub shoulders with other believers, to encourage you and spur you on to run the race. And a lot of you joined this church because you wanted that for your kid. But what about you? Are you modeling to your kids right now that when they throw up their hat at graduation, that they don't need that in their life anymore? That they only need that if their schedule allows? For you all, this room is too big. We don't have room for Mario Kart or Papa Shot in this sanctuary, right? This room is too big. You need other points of relationship with other believers. Can I contradict something that probably contradicts all what I just said? I think those relationships can happen with the people in your life right now that aren't quite there, that aren't necessarily forming you into the image that you want to be. Because you can be the one to spur them on to more. Because at mile 11, I was not on a 2-hour pace. But when I had someone call me to more, that's when the victory happened. And so you can call your people to more. Maybe you're gonna form a life group with the people you're already going to church with. Saying like, hey, like us sitting next to each other isn't enough. We need to talk and pray with each other. Maybe you're gonna ask someone out to coffee this week and you're gonna share something that you haven't kind of kept in because you wanna stuff all the bad and all the hurt down, but you know that you need someone to cover your weaknesses. Maybe you're gonna invite someone to have lunch with you after church so you guys can talk through the sermon, right? And I know schedules are busy, especially in the end of spring, but guys, I love my life group because it schedules in my week a time for this, right? Because I know if I don't schedule this into my week, it's not gonna happen. And so I know life is busy. I don't know what it's like to be a parent, but I know this is so important. And so maybe if you're not gonna commit to a life group for the whole year, find a time in your next school year, between May to May, where life is the least busy, and prioritize a life group that semester. Prioritize a mentor that semester. But if you're like, Sam, I'm the only person I know that loves Jesus in my friend group. Or I've tried to call my friends to more, and it hasn't worked. Then it's time for you to find a new community. And we want to do everything in our power here at the River to make that possible. We have here this quote by Jenny Allen. She says, remember to look for your people in unexpected places. Life stage doesn't matter, age doesn't matter. Find the people who are following after Jesus and then go with them. Right? We oftentimes stop the community that God has blessed us with because like, oh, Sam, they're not what I imagined my community in my 20s looking like. They're not the people in my life that look like me. They have no similar interests to me. How am I ever gonna know them? Sam, it's kind of awkward at the beginning. No, just find the people that are going after Jesus and then go with them. You see, I heard a sermon like this at the River when I was just a college student here. And so I felt compelled that I was supposed to join a life group. And I signed up for a life group on the app, and it said, okay, it's gonna be Monday nights at 7 o'clock at the church. Perfect. Show up expecting a lot of other college students to be there, and I was gonna have this community that I dreamed of. I walk into the room, and it's this big circle of all married couples. Literally every single person was a married person with their spouse. And then me. I was already like texting my friend back at campus being like, bro, you gotta call and say there's like an emergency or something because like I gotta get out of here. But because I had the courage to stay, because I had the courage to live this out saying I'm just gonna find the people that are following after Jesus and then go with them. That life group is the same life group that when I graduated college later that semester, online, in my parents' house because it was COVID semester, same people from 4.5 hours away mailed me a graduation gift and excited to celebrate that thing with me. So here at the River, our hassle-free guarantee is that we want to give you every option to get into that kind of community. You can go on the website or the app and click on life groups, and you'll be getting a whole catalog of these groups that you can join. It'll give you times, if there's childcare available, what they're studying, who the leader is, right? And if you look through these like, Sam, I'm not sure any of these fit for me. You can press a check mark on a box that gives one of the people on our staff and on our team the power to find a group for you. We'll even just like present you, hey, this is the one we think best possible for you. As we've been talking about this image of people raising you above the water, I kept thinking about this story in Mark chapter 2. It's probably familiar to a lot of you. It says a few days later, when Jesus again entered Capernaum, the people heard that he had come home. They gathered in such large numbers that there was no room left, not even outside the door. And he preached the word to them. Some men came bringing to him a paralyzed man carried by the four of them. Since they could not get him to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus and digging through it and then lowered the mat to the man that was lying on. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralyzed man, son, your sins are forgiven. I love to imagine being in the room with Jesus at this story. He started to have straw falling from the ceiling. All of a sudden you hear that of them cutting a hole in the roof, right? You're hearing footsteps. on the roof all the way like, dude, I got front row tickets to Jesus. Like, stop this, right? And then a hole opens up, ceiling on Jesus' head, and down comes this paralyzed man. And Jesus says, when Jesus saw there, not just the paralyzed man's faith, the faith of the whole group, he said to the paralyzed man, son, your sins are forgiven. Guys, we find our purpose, we find freedom in the context of community. Who in your life is tearing off pieces of the roof saying, I don't care how awkward it's gonna get, how many people are gonna look weirdly at me, how different this is than the rest of the culture. I just wanna get you to Jesus. And who are you doing that for in your life? Who are you tearing off the roof for? Guys, there's so much more to this life than just casual relationships, than isolation, than dreaming for a community. We need an intentionally intrusive community to live out a purpose. But that's not just gonna be handed to you. You gotta do something about it. No one's gonna ask you what you're struggling with. You gotta have the courage to say it. No one is going to say, this is the people for you that God has given you. You just gotta go to people and have awkward conversations and embrace the awkward and embrace the differences, because you know that the blessing of God, the way to achieve our purpose, is only found in the context of community. People that are praying for you, that are covering your vulnerable spots, that are serving alongside you. You need an intentionally intrusive community. Your only step is to do it. Would you pray with me? God, we thank you so much for today. We thank you so much that you have commanded your blessing, the context of people. God, I pray for 5 minutes of courage for every single person in this room. God, that they would be given a name, a face, God, and that they would get the courage to seek that person out, to ask someone to coffee, to confess their vulnerable spots, God, to ask for prayer, to get rid of this image of this perfect, polished life of achieving your purpose and say, this is where I am. Would you raise me above the water? God, I pray that freedom would be found there. I pray that purpose would be found there. I pray that anyone that wants to force awkwardness or delusion, God, that you would reign in these friendships, God, and that these friendships might achieve your blessing and would allow us to live this purpose that you have called us to live. We love you, Lord. I pray. Amen.